Historically, most limestone caves were thought to be the result of entirely inorganic processes. They were dissolved out by mildly acidic groundwater charged with carbonic acid and subsequently adorned by secondary deposits of calcite in the form of stalactites, stalagmites, and flowstone. But it was eventually realized that it was the respiration of soil bacteria that provided the carbon dioxide that produced the carbonic acid in the first place. And that was just the beginning. Nowadays, microbiologists recognize many microbially facilitated reactions, helping to produce the cave environment that we take for granted. In the early days, it was difficult to study microbes in caves because only about 1% of them could be cultivated in Petri dishes. When you do hear about microbes growing on the agar of Petri dishes, it's because the nutrient media are usually designed to be chemically similar to animal tissues when growing human pathogens. But cave microbes are adapted to extremely starved environments, so when they are dumped into these nutrient-rich media, they gorge themselves to death. This method isn't going to help us very much. The big advance in studying cave microbes was to seek identification without cultivation. Any DNA in the sample was magnified by the polymerase chain reaction, or PCR for short, resulting in millions of copies of the DNA, which could then be sequenced. Vast dendrograms of the cave microbes could then be prepared, revealing what activities are taking place in a microbial community. Overall, about 100 kingdoms of microbial life were thus identified, far surpassing the 3 or 5 original kingdoms of life originally thought to exist. All of this will seem rather remote to the average cave explorer, however. In 2006, well-known cave microbiologist Hazel Barton published a short list of 6 features that suggest microbial presence and activity. A. Dots. Microbial colonies on the surface of a rock. B. Color. Microbial activity leading to the discoloration of a rock surface. C. Precipitation. Banded mineralization on a rock surface by microbial activity. D. Corrosion residues. Brightly colored corrosion residue formed on a cave ceiling. E. Structural changes. A soft cave ceiling. F. Biofilms. A white biofilm coating in the streambed of a cave. We'll take a look at a few of these in one highly decorated cave under the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, a veritable cave of microbes known as Heinrich Cave. While an artificial cave, originally dug from the sandstone bedrock as a brewery cave, it was abandoned more than a century ago and began a strange afterlife as a bat hibernaculum and sampling location.
I'll say a few words about the history of Heinrich Cave. It's basically a post-Civil War thing. It was from 1866 to 1903. This was the lagering cellars of the Heinrich Brewery. Now it went under several different owners and names and so on, but I'm not going to go into those details here. And then in 1903, it was abandoned, not like with a lot of other brewery caves around the Twin Cities because they had switched to the above ground system. Was banned because Heinrich amalgamated with several other breweries to form Grain Belt, and they moved to northeast Minneapolis, and they didn't need this one anymore. That was basically the reason. We don't hear anything more about this cave for about a generation. And then in the 1930s, there was an era of filling, or fillage. During the Great Depression, the Great Sewer Interceptor System was dug under the Twin Cities, and they passed pretty close here. And we'll see a place in the back end. And it actually nicked the cave, kind of one edge of this old lagering cave. And in doing so, hey, this is a great place to dump all the tunnel sand that we're digging out here. You got to get rid of this. So they threw it in here. They started backfilling the cave. in the 1930s. And that's why, you know, there's some room in here, but some of these rooms, they're like just crawl passages. You're walking on a huge pile of sand in a passage that's actually 20 feet high. And who knows what's down there? I mean, I'm sure people lived in here during the Great Depression, and all their stuff, that's all buried underneath us, underneath the floors, far below the floors here. Now we don't hear anything for about 50 years, for about half a century. Don't know what's going on until in the 1980s, U of M students started using this cave for playing Dungeons and Dragons. And that's when I was first introduced to this place. And I remember coming down here, and you would find forts made out of sand, and you'd find plastic swords and helmets down here. So these guys, these nerds are really taking this kind of serious. And that was all part of the, you know, the satanic panic era, again, that I've spoken of in another video. It was assumed that this game was, you know, somehow connected with Satanism, all this kind of stuff. So in 1990, we get into the bat hibernaculum era. The DNR established this as a bat hibernaculum for the eastern pipistrelle bat, or now called the tricolor bat. And it stayed locked for about a decade, from 1990 to 2000. And then after that, its location became so widely known on the internet, which is a new thing, that, you know, it just, they couldn't keep the cave gate sealed after that. And I should say, in explanation here, we are on what's been called one of the coldest days in the past 3 years. It's very cold outside. This is a bat hibernaculum. We're going to avoid the bat chamber. I don't even know that there are any anymore, but we're going to stay away from that place so we don't disturb any bats during our trip here. Well, so then after the year 2000, it became kind of the focus for some studies by, some microbial studies by U of M researchers. This is real convenient for them to come in here and grab samples. And again, I can't, we'll look at some places in here, but I can't, I'm bound by confidentiality. I can't reveal exactly where those locations are. But I would like to talk about the some of the interesting results that we've had with that. This incidentally is a great place just to look at a little bit of the geology in this cave. Of course, down here we have the yellowish sandstone with these paleo water tables you can see in there, kind of oxidizing a more deeper shade of orange there. And then above that we have this greenish Glenwood shale. Kind of comes up here. We got kind of, and then we have the Platteville limestone. Now, this right here is not, this is actually the base of the Mifflin member of the Platteville limestone. The actual base of the Platteville limestone, the Pecatonica, that has fallen away. As you can see, it's a thin member. It's not, and when you get really wide rooms like this, sometimes that layer kind of just drops down. That's what you see on the floor around here as breakdown slabs. And I'm standing right here at this great bluff parallel master joint running through the Platteville limestone. And we'll follow it through the cave. You can see it here. All these little soda straw stalactites here. And this is the main way that groundwater enters the cave, because we are sort of near the center of the Twin Cities Artesian Basin here. and the water is kind of coming down towards us. And so sometimes it gets tapped off before it gets to the bluffs, and it just drips down. That's what's happening here. And as you can see, it is formed what I got is like a giant stalagmite. I mean, this thing is like, what, 8 feet in diameter? Have you ever seen a stalagmite 8 feet in diameter? Now, if this thing totally grew up to full size, that would be, you know, it would be truly immense. But you sort of get the feel for it there. All the flowstone has started growing up. And all this is grown up on top of the fill, the Depression era fill that was put in this cave by the sand hogs or sewer workers. They just kind of and started growing on the top of that. So we should just go and look at some of the other features in the cave. Okay, here we're gonna give an exhibition of what's known as the calcite afterglow, and that is these soda straws, these calcite soda straws. Illuminate them with UV light, and then when we shut that off, there'll be a second. For a few seconds, you'll see the calcite glowing by itself. So it's an interesting phenomenon. Ooh, yeah, I saw that one. Okay, I've come across one of the old fortifications in Heinrich Cave. One of the places where, as I recall, they used to put this was a fort used by the Dungeons and Dragons people, and as long as you had a plastic sword and a plastic helmet, you were good to go. You could defend your fort. Actually, just kidding. No, they were using it for that, but obviously, this was something related to the brewery, a wall. The stonework dates back to the brewery days, back in the 1800s. But I guess now it has a different use. Okay, this is the rock stacking gallery in Heinrich Cave. And here's a large example where people have just piled up the slabs and pieces of shale that they find. It's actually there's actually not many piles in here today. I remember coming here once a few years ago, and there were like a gazillion of these rock stacks in here. But it looks like a lot of those must have got knocked over with all the considerable amount of traffic coming through here. But the Glenwood Shale is plainly exposed as a green band up near the ceiling in this passage. And so we kind of see where we are stratigraphically and on the top of a big pile here of material. This is the gypsum crawlway in Heinrich Cave. And it is supposed to be, what it might actually be is, it's called a sandhog crawlway on the MSS map. And what it might be is the passageway that was dug by the sewer workers to bring sand into the cave and dump it here. So that's one of the theories about the origin of this passage. It is the warmest and driest part of the cave, and therefore it is no good for bat hibernation. It's so warm that the bats cannot get down into a state of torpor here. Now, there are three forms of gypsum in this cave. There's a kind of layering form of gypsum, which forms in the Platteville, and that can cause breakdown by wedging. So the gypsum will expand, and then it'll wedge out a piece of the ceiling. The second form of gypsum is gypsum flowers. I've seen them during some visits. I haven't seen any today. The third form of gypsum that we find in this crawlway is called gypsum frostwork. And it's like these shiny needles. And I think you can even see them at a distance and you look down this passageway. We've retrieved some specimens and they are just sparkling and gorgeous. One of the things, however, is that it is humidity dependent. So that if it's a very humid, these crystals will deliquesce and shrink away. So it has to remain dry to even that they can manifest themselves. Now, how would you get gypsum in here? I mean, this is a limestone cave, right? Well, what happens is the iron, there's pyrites in the overlying Platteville glacial materials, and that oxidizes, forms iron. We'll see some iron formations in a bit. The sulfur, however, is oxidized to sulfuric acid. And that reacts with limestone, which is calcium carbonate, by a decomposition to form calcium sulfate, which is gypsum. And that's the same origin of gypsum that we find in some of the famous caves in the U.S., like Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, Lechuguilla Cave, Cueva de Villaluz in Mexico. All very strong gypsum caves. Okay, here we have another formation in the cave, other kind of deposit. This is moon milk, and that is a calcitic deposit, microbially mediated, and it goes for some distance. It may be different moisture relations along this shale layer here. We can see the Glenwood Shale here, and there's kind of like a little crack or parting, shale partings there. It may be that it's it's more moist or something like that in this band, because the band does go for quite a ways in this stone, in the stone stacking gallery. The book Subterranean Twin Cities calls this cave a mineral vault, and it's pretty obvious why. Now, on the classic map of Heinrich Cave by Jason Engelhardt in 1988, he calls this the Red Room, and that's obvious why too. If you look here, you can see these red rusticles, as they're called. And mineralogically, these are iron oxides and iron hydroxides, and they're known as like ferrohydrites and goethite. And there could be some humic acid kind of reddish coloring in here also. Some of it originally thought to be inorganic, just completely inorganic, now thought to be microbially mediated. Okay, and then we have some other interesting colors in here. We have this jet black formation here. This is probably manganese, and in particular bernicite. It's manganese oxide. All this water is coming down through this master joint running through the Platteville limestone here. It is a bluff parallel joint. And what it's doing is it's intercepting groundwater that's coming down towards us, and then it gets diverted into the cave. Because we are near the center of the Twin Cities Artesian Basin. And so all that groundwater it's kind of a shallow saucer, and it's kind of coming towards us and leads to springs on the river bluffs and so on. And also, things like this. Okay, so where is all this iron coming from then? Ultimately, I believe it is from pyrite that is in the Platteville limestone above us, or in the glacial drift even above that. Okay, and what happened? Pyrite is iron sulfide. The iron that iron sulfide oxidizes. The iron part comes down here, and we see see it down here. The sulfur part gets oxidized to sulfuric acid, and then it forms the gypsum deposits that we see in this cave. So there's a lot of stuff kind of going on here. I even saw, as we were coming into the cave, I saw some places where I could actually see what I believe is pyrite in the limestone. So I know it's there. So anyways, so this is just a continuation. This bluff parallel master joint is just a continuation of the one we saw when we came in the entrance room. And it's part of the reason that this is or was a hibernaculum for the eastern pipistrelle bat, because it's a moisture-loving species, and in addition to the cool temperatures in here, there's a lot of moisture. And figure when you see a pipistrelle on the wall, it's covered with these little droplets. It's like this silver sheen. But we haven't seen a single bat in here. It's January. We haven't seen a single bat in here. It's because of the high traffic, I believe. The high traffic and white nose syndrome together are pretty much mixed that. So anyway, so we got a lot of, potentially a lot of microbiology going on here with these formations here. Okay, we're at a side pool in the red room, and there's some unusual speleothems here. Um, we have some more. We have cave pearls here, which are just well known. Um, and we come here, and we've got this little drip pocket here. It has like soda straws that have fallen off the ceiling, and it had another coating of calcite added to them. But over here, I think is the most unusual thing. We have these formations here that are there's. It appears like they are foliose, and then they have this like crenulated edge to them, and they stick up above the surface of the water. Now, this is the first time I've seen that in this cave. Um, And then we got calcite rafts floating around here also on these rimstone pools. But it all goes to show that this water here is super saturated with regard to calcium carbonate. So you get all these, getting some unusual things here. So. Well, here's another unusual deposit in this cave. It has a silky smooth kind of texture to it. I can only describe it as like cave butter, something like that.
Heinrich, formerly thought to be a dead cave, has proved to be the cave of microbes. New frontiers in microbiology are being pushed at the cave by University of Minnesota researchers. The idea of sampling caves to find cures for diseases goes back to the bacteriologist Selman Abraham Waxman in the 1940s. He developed the antibiotic streptomycin from the streptomyces used to treat tuberculosis from cave sediments. Likewise, at Heinrich Cave, University of Minnesota, researchers have for years been sampling for unusual microbial life in the efforts to find a cure for white nose syndrome, which has been wiping out bat populations in the eastern United States. White nose syndrome is caused by a fungus that grows in the respiratory tract of the bat while it hibernates. They isolated about 100 different bacterial strains from both Heinrich and Banholzer caves over the years, and continued to go back to Heinrich several times a year. Approximately 20% of these strains show some kind of antibacterial activity, and a smaller percent inhibit fungi. They've been working through the most active strains to figure out the bioactive components. However, as things stand now, Heinrich is ruined as a bat hibernaculum owing to frequent disturbance during the winter months. While the present crew took all possible precautions to avoid the known hibernation area, it turns out that not one single bat was seen in the whole cave on this cold January day during the 2025 polar vortex. The combined stress of high traffic from a nearby campus and the ravages of the fungus has proved too much. The gating system would need to be entirely repaired to fix this situation. While unrelated to the bat cure, the U of M researchers have identified some other unusual microbes in Heinrich Cave. They isolated a very unique bacterium that can only live in marine conditions, saltwater media, and is highly iridescent. It doesn't produce any bioactive molecules, however. The most well-studied version of this kind of bacteria is called Cellulophaga lytica, which has been isolated from the marine environment by others. Given that Heinrich Cave is in the center of North America, about as far from the surrounding oceans as you can get, this presents the most remarkable mystery at the Cave of Microbes.